every time you feel like you cannot go on. You feel so lost and that you're so alone. All you see is night and darkness all around. You feel so helpless, you can't see which way to go. Don't despair and never lose hope, 'cause Allah is always by your side. Insha'Allah, 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 you'll find your way. Insha'Allah, 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 you'll find your way.
I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago.
They've created ISIS. Hillary Clinton created ISIS with Obama.
Dass wir uns mit in einer Lebenslüge sehr bequem eingerichtet haben. Und diese Lebenslüge heißt eben, die anderen, wir sind die Guten, wir sind die Edlen, wir sind die Hilfreichen. Und die Wirklichkeit ist anders. Ich glaube, dass wir im Westen die Welt nicht erobert haben durch die Großartigkeit unserer Ideen, die Großartigkeit unserer Werte, die Großartigkeit unserer Religion, sondern dadurch, dass wir viel gnadenloser Gewalt angewendet haben als andere. Und wenn ich jetzt noch ein Stückchen ernster werden darf, es waren ja keine Muslime, die auf Kreuzzügen 4 Millionen Menschen massakriert haben. Es waren keine Muslime, die im Kolonialismus 50 Millionen Menschen umgebracht haben. Und es waren auch keine Muslime, die den Ersten und den Zweiten Weltkrieg mit 70 Millionen Toten angefangen haben. Und es waren keine Muslime, die 6 Millionen Juden umgebracht haben. Sondern es war die Gewalttätigkeit der westlichen Welt.
Wer hat den Ersten Weltkrieg gemacht? Die Muslime? Den Zweiten Weltkrieg? Die Muslime? Wer hat die Atombombe auf Hiroshima geschmissen? Die Muslime? Wer hat 20 Millionen Aborigines in Australien umgebracht? Die Muslime? Wer hat über 100 Millionen Indianer in Nordamerika platt gemacht? Muslime? Über 50 Millionen Indianer in Südamerika platt gemacht? Muslime? Wer hat 180 Millionen Menschen aus Afrika als Sklaven gebracht, von denen 77% unterwegs sind?
The strongest voices are coming from those who are jihadists and extremists, and that represents a bigger piece of the pie than we often think is true.
There's no question.
Okay, so having said that, and even if that is true statistically or otherwise, the key thing to recognize that I don't think is part of the argument, but I think should be, is that there are voices that are oftentimes raised in opposition to these jihadists and to these extreme acts. But guess what? They don't get covered. They don't get exposed. And they're not given the same level of platform that we see the jihadists.
One reason they don't get exposed is because they're afraid to speak out, because it's the only religion that acts like the mafia, that will fucking kill you if you say the wrong thing, draw the wrong picture, or write the wrong book.
So you do have,
and there's a reason why Ayaan Hirsi Ali needs bodyguards 24/7.
You do have that element of fear as well, but you also have other braver souls out there who do speak out and who who
are risking their lives to do that.
Like the Muslim clerics and others from Australia to Europe to the United States just recently publicly put their names on paper declaring their opposition to what ISIS and others are doing. So there are those voices, but where was the coverage? Where was that story to sort of create a different picture?
Well, what is your solution? What is your ask?
No,
just condemn Islam?
The solution, the solution is very much what
we've killed more Muslims than they've killed us by an awful lot. We've invaded more Muslims.
I'm not for more killing.
An awful lot. And yet somehow we're exempted from these things because they're not really a reflection of what we believe in. We did it by accident. That's why we invaded Iraq and put 4 million people.
We're not convincing anybody.
It's not I'm specifically telling you that I disagree with what you think.
I know, and we're obviously not convincing anybody.
I don't understand. ISIS couldn't fill a AA ballpark in Charleston, West Virginia, and you were making a career out of ISIS.
But no, it's not just ISIS. It's all jihadists. It's global. It's a phenomenon of global jihad.
I think that's the opposite. There is those things. There's ISIS. There's global jihadists. The question is the degree to which you're willing to say, because I've witnessed this behavior, which we all object to on the part of these people, I'm willing to flatly condemn those of you I don't know and have never met.
No,
This is
not
based
condemning
on
people. It's ideas.
And,
gotta make
and people who believe in those ideas.
So let's go back to those people who believe in
Based on reality, Ben. We're not making it up that that in the Muslim world it is mainstream belief.
But this is such a caricature of Indonesia, of Malaysia, so much of the world. And this does have the tinge a little bit of the way white racists talk about African Americans and define blacks by.
What you're saying is because they are a minority, we shouldn't criticize.
That's not that much of a minority. It's the second biggest religion in the world.
Exactly, but
Islam at this moment is the mother lode of bad ideas.
Jesus.
So we have
that's
ideas
just a fact.
like blasphemy.
It's an ugly
apostasy.
It is one basic liberal
let me
principle
unpack
is
it.
tolerance.
Let me unpack it.
But not for intolerance.
No, of course not. But the picture you're painting is, to some extent, true, but is hugely incomplete. It is certainly true that plenty of fanatics and jihadis are Muslim, but the people who are standing up to them, Malala, incredible Muhammad Ali Dadak in Iran, in prison for 9 years for speaking up for Christians. A friend that I had in Pakistan who was shot this year, Rashid Rahman, for defending people accused of apostasy.
Or how about the more than 1 billion people who aren't fanatical, who don't punish women, who just want to go to the store,
wait a second. Wait a second.
Don't do any of the things, but you're saying all Muslims stereotyping.
Wait a second.
And you painting the whole group religion with that.
No, let's get.
I saw a story this week on CNN about a minister in Gainesville, Florida, who has declared September 11th of this year Burn the Quran Day. Thank you for your reaction. That was mine. This guy is a minister at a non-denominational church called the Dove World Outreach Center. He said all kinds of disparaging, insulting, inaccurate things about Islam that I'm not going to repeat from this pulpit. His message is about hate and fear. And I can assure you, there is nothing in the Gospels, there is nothing in the teaching of Jesus Christ that says anything about burning the holy texts of other traditions. It is not there. The proposed burning of the Quran is obscene. It is not the work of peace. It is not the work of understanding. It is not the work of building bridges. It is insanity. Now, the good news is there are a lot of groups, a lot of churches, even the National Association of Evangelicals, who are condemning this action and urging the church to cancel their event. A conversation about God demands grace and openness, a willingness to learn, to have our own ideas challenged, our convictions questioned. These are the hallmarks of humility. When I was in seminary, I read from someone whose name is lost to me now, when you speak of God, your voice should shake a little. You know, Jesus had no time for religious know-it-alls. He saved some of his harshest criticism for church leaders, for the Pharisees, the religious leaders who were so certain about who was out and who was in, who was holy and unholy, clean and unclean. Jesus was forever taking all this religious certainty and turning it on its head. And we can only imagine what Jesus would have said about Pastor Terry Jones and his Burn the Quran campaign. I think he would say, this has got to stop. Followers of Islam believe that the Quran is a collection of revelations received by the Prophet Muhammad from God about 1400 years ago. They believe that Muhammad was the last of a series of prophets and teachers and messengers that included Adam, Moses, Jesus, Abraham, all names revered by us as well. The word Islam means peaceful surrender to the will of God. The Quran was written at a time when the Muslim people were being driven from their homes, persecuted, and killed. The Old Testament was written at a time when Jewish people were being driven from their homes, persecuted, and killed. And religious scholars will tell you that most Holy Scriptures have stories of war and violence in them. Throughout history, most faiths have used these texts to justify violence. And if there's anyone in this room at this moment who's thinking that I've got it wrong, after church today, pull out your Bible and look up Psalm 137. And you'll see that our own text has passages that can make us uncomfortable. But also, like the Bible, the predominant message of the Quran is of peace and care and loving God, justice, care for the neighbor, care for the stranger. In the Bible, we have thou shalt not kill. In the Quran, we have whoever kills another, surely he is killing all of humanity. And whoever saves the life of another, surely he saves the lives of all humanity. These are words of peace, words of faith, words that could save the world if we would take them to heart. The second thing you can do, the next time someone sends you one of those emails demonizing Islam, delete it. Don't forward it. Don't participate in the stereotyping. Don't give in to your fear. It's okay to be a little afraid. We all have those emotions. Just don't give into it. Don't sign on for it. Don't focus on this tiny group of extremists who commit acts of violence. Focus on the hundreds of millions of Muslim people in the world who are people of faith, whose priorities and concerns and families are not so different from your own. And third, when you think of Muslim people, think of individuals. Think of the professor at Ohio State. Think of the engineer at Honda. Think of the teacher at the elementary school down the street. When you think of Muslim people, remember those who died on 9/11, not the hijackers. There was only a handful of them. Remember Mohammed Sunhami Hamandi. He was born in Pakistan. He came to the United States as a small child with his parents. He played high school football. He went to college. He became a part-time ambulance driver. He died, this Muslim young man, on 9/11, trying to rescue people and save lives. When you think of Muslim people, remember Mohammed Salahuddin Cloudhurry. He was a waiter at Windows on the World, which was at the top of the World Trade Center. He died that day. His wife had their baby 2 days later. When you think of Muslim people, remember Rama Salih. She was a woman, 28 years old. Her neighbors described her as fun and outgoing and generous. And she died on American Airlines Flight 11, 7 months pregnant with her first child. Remember the founder of the Islamic Circle of North America, who worked in the World Trade Center and also died on September 11th. That same group now is giving away tens of thousands of copies of the Quran in response to the campaign about burning the Quran. In the language of their own tradition, they are spreading words of faith and peace and hope. One of the ladies at the 8:30 service this morning said to me after, maybe we should declare September 11th, buy a Quran and read some of it. It is for us to share our message of love and hope and peace, but let us do it with grace and respect and above all, humility.
talk a little bit about this latest article or blog that you wrote, because it sort of jumped out at me. You said you don't want the Islamic Cultural Center to be built near Ground Zero. You want it to be built on Ground Zero. Tell us why.
Well, I'm just so offended by the bullying that's been taking place, picking on people who make up a very small percentage of our population and treating them as if they're not Americans. And they have every right to be in, near, around, at Ground Zero as anyone else. And I just got to thinking that, you know, the America that I believe in is an America that is generous of spirit and not one that wants to attack people because of their religious faith. And I personally feel very bad that these 19 murderers of 9/11 who killed 3,000 people were able to hijack a religion, did something what they said was in the name of Islam, and have made life very difficult for everybody else who is a member of this faith. And I thought, what better way could we, those of us who are not of the Islamic faith, do to show our fellow Muslim Americans that we so understand that these murderers hijack their religion from them, than to help restore the good name of their faith right there at Ground Zero. I mean, frankly, I never believed that there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let me interrupt for a moment, because as you know, a lot of Americans think that they have every right to build the cultural center and mosque near Ground Zero, but they don't think it's necessarily appropriate. A brand new Quinnipiac University poll, for example, asked, is it appropriate to build a mosque and Islamic center near Ground Zero? 28% said yes, 63% said no. Why do Americans, why are they so opposed to this idea of building this mosque and cultural center near, not on Ground Zero, but even near Ground Zero?
Yeah, even near it. Yeah, I think it's because we're a little slow on the uptake sometimes. Those are pretty much the exact numbers of the people at the beginning of the Iraq War, of 28%, 30% opposed it, and about 70% were in favor of it. We always seem to get it wrong at first, whether that was with slavery, killing Indians, women not voting. We're not very good at the beginning of these things. We're really great, though, as we move along. We live in a nation where, sadly, people listen to things. They get afraid very easily. We have 40 million adult Americans who are functional illiterates, which means they can't read and write above the 4th grade level. So that's the America we live in, and sometimes we have to put up with that. But everybody, regardless of their level of ignorance, I believe, at their core is good and has a good heart. And if presented with the truth, and the truth is that Muslim Americans are Americans the same as every other American.
And what do you say, Michael?
What
do you say, Michael, to a family member of someone who was killed at Ground Zero, who says, you know, I don't really think this is appropriate? Look in the camera and tell us what you would say to that family member.
I would say that I completely understand how you feel. If a member of my family was murdered, I live in a nation where they would not allow me to sit on the jury. Yet common sense kind of says to me, well, who better to judge those who took my family member's life than the family itself to get retribution? But we don't have a system like that, do we? The reason we don't is because we have to separate the emotion from it, because sometimes if we just let emotion take over and run things, the wrong decisions get made. I went to Mass yesterday, Wolf. Do you think I'm a pedophile sympathizer? Should I be judged because some priests committed a crime against children? Do you think less of me because of that, or because Timothy McVeigh was a Catholic and blew up the Oklahoma City building? Should a Catholic church not be allowed anywhere near the Oklahoma City building because he was Catholic? I got to tell you, I remember the very first presidential election. I remember I was 6 years old, John Kennedy versus Richard Nixon. And I remember, as 6 years old, hearing all this stuff about if Kennedy was elected, the Pope was going to run the country. And I remember feeling like there was something wrong, there was something bad about Why was I bad? Because I was Catholic. And this is our history, and we have got to stop this. And those of us who are part of the majority have to always stand up for the minority when they're being bullied by people who are using this issue for their own political gain.
What did you think of the way the president, the commanding general in Afghanistan, General Petraeus, the news media for that matter, handled the whole issue of that pastor in Florida who said he was going to burn a couple hundred copies of the Quran?
Well, it's never good to have our general saying that we're afraid of anything. I mean, I got a whole other thing about that. We could do that, take another show on that. I just think when you're talking about burning the Quran, let me just point out again to my fellow Americans, 80% of whom don't have a passport, never leave the country, never see the rest of the world, don't know anything about what's going on. You know, I've had the good fortune to be able to get out of here and see a bit of this planet we live on. The Quran has 25 different mentions of Jesus in that holy book. 25. They consider Jesus a messenger of God. Why would you burn a book that beautifully mentions Jesus at least 24 times? I mean, how many Americans even know that? It really is just it just seems so crazy to me, and I'm fed up with it, and I just felt like I had to take a stand and say something about this.
We're talking about terrorism, and obviously there is something that is going on that they're getting from the Quran. Have you read Sam Harris's book, The End of Faith?
They're not getting it from the Quran. Bill, I'm glad. Let's use this point for a moment, because as you know, as a student of religion, their books are complex. They're compiled, and taking them out of context is a very easy thing to do.
I've heard this many times, and I don't buy it. I'm sorry.
Well,
Sam Harris says on almost every page the Quran instructs observant Muslims to despise non-believers.
That's absurd, ridiculous.
And he quotes it. Am I getting the wrong translation? Because that's what every Muslim always tells me.
No, you must be. I would recommend.
A lot of bad translations then.
Well, why don't you read the part where it says that anyone who takes a life is as if he killed the whole world, and anyone who saves a life is as if he saved the whole world? What about the one where it says that there be no compulsion in religion, and that it's literally wrong?
Well, then where are the terrorists getting their instructions from? They're getting it from something else.
Like any ideologue, they will take things out of context to do what they want to do. If you listen to terrorist rhetoric, Bill, what they do is they cite politics. They cite political grievances. They don't really use too much religion. As a matter of fact, when you find Muslims who reject terrorism, as I do and almost everyone does, it often is for spiritual and religious reasons and moral reasons. But when people want to justify it, they justify it on political reasons. This is well documented. Check out the Gallup poll. Check out people who've studied this stuff. One of the things that I think we can do to undermine terrorist ideology is actually to use people who know the Quran and to go after people like Anwar al-Awlaki who misquote it, misuse it, and don't really understand it. So,
I hope that happens. All right. Thank you for joining us, Congressman. I appreciate your time.
Atheists see all religions as evil, violent, threatening. What the problem I have with Daniel's speech is that Daniel comes here to run this robust defense of Christianity, forgetting that his fellow Christians, people who said they were acting in the name of Jesus, gave us the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, the anti-Jewish pogroms, European colonialism in Africa and Asia, the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, not to mention countless arson and bomb attacks on abortion clinics in the United States of America to this very day. I would like a little bit of humility from Daniel first before he begins lecturing other communities and other faiths on violence, terror and intolerance. But, no thanks. People coming here, putting forward these views, putting forward these sweeping opinions. Listen to Professor Robert Pape of the University of Chicago, one of America's leading terrorism experts, who, unlike our esteemed opposition tonight, studied every single case of suicide terrorism between 1980 and 2005, 315 cases in total. And he concluded, and I quote, "There is little connection between suicide terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism or any of the world's religions. Rather, what nearly all suicide terrorist attacks have in common is a specific secular and strategic goal to compel modern democracies to withdraw military forces from territory that the terrorists consider to be their homeland." And the irony is, when we talk about terrorism, the irony is that the opposition and the Muslim terrorists, the Al-Qaeda types, actually have one thing in common, because they both believe that Islam is a warlike, violent religion. They both agree on that. They have everything in common. Osama bin Laden would be nodding along to everything he's heard tonight from the opposition side. He agrees with them. The problem is that mainstream Muslims don't. The majority of Muslims around the world don't. In fact, a gentleman here started quoting all sorts of polls. Gallup carried out the biggest poll of Muslims around the world, of 50,000 Muslims in 35 countries. 93% of Muslims rejected 9/11 and suicide attacks, and of the 7% who didn't, they all, when polled and focus grouped, cited political reasons for their support for violence, not religious reasons. And as for Islamic scholars and what they say, well, Daniel talks about our University of Oxford. We'll go down to Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies, get hold of a man named Sheikh Afifi al-Akiti, who is a massively well-credentialed and well-respected Islamic scholar, who has studied across the world, who in the days after 7/7 published a fatwa denouncing terrorism in the name of Islam, calling for the protection of all non-combatants at all times, and describing suicide bombings as an innovation with no basis in Islamic law. Go and listen to Sheikh Tahir al-Qadri, one of Pakistan's most famous Islamic scholars, who published a 600-page fatwa condemning the killing of all innocents and all suicide bombings unconditionally without any ifs or buts. There's nothing new here. This is mainstream Islam, mainstream scholarship, which has said this for years. You don't go out and kill people willy-nilly in the high street or anywhere else, on a bus or a mall, based on verses of the Quran that you cherry-pick without any context, any understanding, any interpretation, or any commentary. People say yesterday's bombers, and we've got to be careful, there's a trial going on, were yesterday's attackers, motivated by Islam? Big debate. I don't believe they were. Let's say they were. Let's say Faisal Shahzad, the Times Square bomber, was motivated by Islam. Let's assume, for sake of argument, that Richard Reeves, the shoe bomber, was motivated by Islam. If Islam is responsible for these killings, if Islam is what is motivating these people, and Islam is therefore not a religion of peace, a religion of war, then ask yourself this question: why aren't the rest of us doing it? Why is it such a tiny minority of Muslims are interpreting their religion in the way that the opposition claim they are? Let's assume there are 16,000 suicide bombers in the world. There aren't. Let's assume there are for the sake of argument. That's 0.001% of the Muslim population globally. What about the other 99.99% of Muslims who the opposition tonight either ignore or smear? The reality is that the rest of us aren't blowing ourselves up tonight. The reality is that the opposition came here tonight not worried about the fact that me and Adam might pull open our jackets and blow ourselves up tonight because we're followers of a warlike warrior religion which wants to take over Europe and Daniel's university. The issue is this. The issue is this. Unless the opposition can tell us tonight, and Peter Atkins is here, one of our great atheist intellectuals, can tell us tonight, they can answer this question tonight: why don't the vast majority of Muslims around the world behave as violently and aggressively as a tiny minority of politically motivated extremists? Then they might as well give up and stop pretending they have anything relevant to say about Islam or Muslims as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, there are the millions of peaceful, non-violent, law-abiding Muslims both in the UK, Europe, Asia, Africa and beyond, who see Islam as the source of their identity, as a source of spiritual fulfillment, of hope, of solace. And there are the phobes, the haters, the bigots out there who want to push the clash of civilizations, who want to divide all of us into them and us and ours and their. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge you all not to fuel the arguments of the phobes and bigots. Don't legitimize their divisions. Don't legitimize their hate. Trust those Muslims who you know, who you've met, who you hear, who don't believe in violence, who do want you to hear the peaceful message of the Quran as they believe it to be taught to the majority of Muslims, the Islam of peace and compassion and mercy, the Islam of the Quran, not of Al-Qaeda. Ladies and gentlemen,
there is a surah called Surah Maida, which is a verse from Quran, which very clearly states that if you heal one man, you heal the whole mankind. This is what God says. And if you hurt one man, you hurt the whole mankind. There is nowhere in Quran. See, we believe Quran is the word of Allah. So there are believers in that book, in that holy book. And I'm very clear, if you're following Allah's Quran, if you're following Allah's Islam, nowhere does it say that you can kill women. As a matter of fact, it says you can't, in a war, you cannot kill a woman, you cannot kill a child, you cannot kill an animal, and you cannot destroy crops. Very clear, there is an Islam from Allah, which is in a holy book. There is an Islam, and very unfortunate, I'm not being anti, but there is an Islam from the mullahs. And I appeal to all of them, that please give the right reading of the Quran to the young people. I do
like to call themselves the Islamic State. But I will tell you the truth. They are not Islamic, and they are not a state. This hateful ideology has nothing to do with Islam itself. And it is rejected by the overwhelming majority of Muslims in Britain and around the world. The Quran says, "O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes that ye may know each other." It says, "Let there be no compulsion in religion." So let this message go out from this hall, that the extremists will never succeed in dividing us. Let the message go out that we know Islam is a religion of peace and it has nothing to do with the ideology of our enemies. Let us stand.
America, these are the spoils that everybody is playing for. This is it. These are the spoils. The world is changing. All of the power is going to change. I'm sorry, but America is going to change. The question is, will she survive? The answer is yes, if we pay attention. So who is playing? Who is sitting at the table and saying, "I'm putting more chips on the table"? Who is actually playing? I contend the United States is not playing. The United States is being played. These are the players at the table, the real serious players. Everybody else is a clown. You have George Soros, you have Russia, China, and Islam. These are the players of the table. And if you look at each of these players, you will see they all have cards that they are holding. And you would say, if you just looked at their cards, who's going to win? Islam, no matter what anybody else says, Islam, in the end, is the winner, because faith trumps all of these things. But in the end, who wins? The guy with the money? No. For a while, the people with the food and the people with the energy. But I contend it's not the people of faith. It is with the people with a firm reliance of divine providence that also fight for true freedom. It's the little guy that always wins. The giant lumbering corporations? No, they always lose. The giant bloated system set up by Louis in Versailles? Loser. For a while they may win. But it's the farmer behind the tree with a rifle or a rake. It was the farmer with the rifle and the rake hiding behind that tree that took the most lumbering giant of its day out. The most powerful nation on earth took him down. It is David that beats Goliath with faith every time. Goliath loses in the end because all Goliaths are arrogant.
Inshallah, inshallah.